You are listening to the Powell Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week I'm doing something I haven't ever done on the podcast. I'm going full Euro. This is my first guest from across the pond, and she is a champion for equality. Anne-Flore Marxer is a badass snowboarder who is also a champion for women. She has fought for equal prize money and equality in general and has become a lightning rod for change in the world of snowboarding. On the podcast, we talk about her super Euro life and times, talk about her fight, and we discuss her new movie project, A Land Shaped by Women. This movie looks at how Iceland has set the bar for gender equality in the world. And Anne-Flore has some strong opinions, and she is not afraid to ruffle feathers to get what she wants. Before we get into the podcast, I want to ask you to follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement, tell your friends about the show, and support my amazing sponsors. They are Evo, Rescue Water, Spy Optic, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Now, let's talk to Anne-Flore Marxer. Where are you right now?
Right now, I am in Istanbul, which is quite unreal.
You were in France just a couple days ago, and it seems like your life is batshit crazy at the moment. I know you're on a promo tour for your movie, A Land Shaped by Women. And what did you do tonight? What was on the agenda?
Well, tonight I had a big presentation in front of this opening ceremony of this festival that selected my film here in Istanbul. And it's been something quite special to me because I did go on tour and I did show the film in so many places all around Europe and in some places in the United States as well. And lately it's been quite incredible to get to show the film in places where the culture is very different and the position of women is very different. So 5 days ago, I was showing the film in Russia, close to the Dead Sea. And today, showing the film in Istanbul, it actually gives it its whole purpose in a way, because some events happened here. They had the Women's March on the 8th of March, and they actually got gassed by the police.
Oh, wow.
All the women that attended that march, they really had to face quite strong opposition. And as an effect from that day, a lot of women that wanted to be participating in this festival and wanted to come see the film starting to be afraid. You know, that festival, it's a women's film festival, and it really is in the idea of supporting and having cinema and films empower women here. And it's something that is really important to women all around the world, but in places where women are oppressed, it makes it even more important for me to be part of it and for me to support it and support those initiatives. So I'm actually really happy I came here, and I was very happy today.
And I guess when you're there, it makes you realize how easy your life is compared to what the women are growing up with in Istanbul.
Yes, it is. But at the same time, it also, people say, oh, gender inequity is not the worst of all inequities. But if you think about it, it is the inequity that is touching the most humans on the planet. We are 52% of humans on the planet. So in that sense, it is the inequity that is reaching the biggest part of the population. Of course, it is better in Europe and it is better in America. And of course, there is a gender pay gap. In Europe, it's 23%. In the US, I believe it's 21%. But how can we imagine that the position of women will improve all around the world if even in those places where it is supposed to be better, it is still a struggle of everyday life? You know, so I kind of feel like if we want to think that the position of women can improve all around the world, we have to make sure that we actually bring it to proper equality where we are in our places where the situation is supposed to be better already.
I'm a believer that the position's not going to change entirely until a lot of older people die off, because it seems like a lot of people in decision-making areas are the people that grew up with the traditional gender roles and pay inequity. So I think that has to happen too, because unfortunately a lot of people in power still have beliefs that are probably different than yours and mine. That's my thought on it.
I like your approach, but that approach to me is taking too much time. And I believe that all of us, we can be part of bringing the changes that we want to see in our society. We got to stop thinking time will bring the change. I think it's time for us to understand it's our responsibility to build the society and the world we want to live in the present tense, and the world and the society we want our children to live in. Because if we are not here today to make that changes, they will inherit from a world that will not be right either. So it's up to us to actually make a change.
I think there needs to be people like you that are spearheading the cause and getting the word out to what people need to hear. But at the same time, I look at it like in my life, I have a son, and he's going to learn from me to respect women and that women are just as capable of doing anything that he can do as he can. And that's just his lifestyle. He's going to grow up knowing that, and he's going to be fine. And when everybody's his age, I think our world will be a better place. But I just feel like gender's one thing, but there's so many things that we need to change. And it's the old people that are hindering society, because if you look at 45 and under, a lot of people are on the same page there, I feel like. But I hear you where you want it now because you deserve it now, and everyone deserves equality. And the only way to get it now is to be the squeaky wheel, which you are.
Agreed. We all part of the change.
So you're the first European I've had on the podcast. I've had a couple Australians, but I've been just your typical American who's focused on Americans because he thinks everything revolves around America. But I know that is not the case, and I'm excited to bring you on. I should say hello and welcome.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. I'm going to keep it on the American topic, and I used to travel a lot for work back in the Bush days, and people seemed to hate Americans. Wherever I went, it was a strange feeling where you'd meet someone at a bar, you'd say you were from America, and then immediately they would just start talking about the government and how we're terrible. Do you remember that time?
Yes, and I can still see it in some places. But altogether, I think people that think that way are the people who didn't get a chance to travel so much either. So from my point of view, in my snowboarding career, I had the time to go all around Europe, and at some point I was just really curious to see how I was working in America. And then I actually got to spend a lot of time in the US. I loved it, and it was just a beautiful time of my life. And it's taught me so much. When you meet other people that are well-traveled, then we are like-minded. And then when we end up meeting people who haven't had the opportunity and the chance to travel, then they see the world surrounding their own little life, and they don't actually understand the bigger picture.
True. But now, fast forward from those Bush days to the days of now, and I don't travel as much anymore, which I think is a blessing, because I would think the perception of America as a whole outside of the U.S. might be even worse with everything that's going on here. You're an outsider who's looking in, and what's the sentiment towards America these days, almost compared to those Bush days?
Well, I'm not going to compare it, but I have to say that, of course, seeing from the outside, it was quite a shock to understand who you elected as the president that you have now. But at the same time, I have to say I was very proud, and I am very proud of the American people going in the streets and actually now really understanding that they have to really fight for what they want to have within their society. And I think that's a big wake-up call. A harsh reality to make you understand that what you know as something that you thought was normal, you actually really have to fight for. And that's something that I'm quite happy to see emerging in America for the past couple of years.
Well, you're good. It seems like you must have had media training or something. No controversial statements there when I gave you a layup, but that is quite all right. There's a big difference in our snow sports worlds as well. I feel like over here in the U.S., it's a totally different animal. Where you grew up, it is part of the fabric of the culture of your life. And is that how life was growing up?
Yeah, I am French. And then we are the people that go down in the street and then actually, cut the heads of all the kings and bringing human rights. And this is my DNA. And that's why I was really surprised to see it happening in America. And that's something that I really value. And that's why being a woman, really trying to bring gender equality, right? Really pushing for a whole industry to bring more opportunities for women. I really felt like I was holding this on my shoulders for so long, pretty much alone. And then the thing is, I couldn't understand why other women in the world wouldn't really be fighting for it in the sense if we are not asking for it, how is it going to get better? But then what I saw from my side, the first thing that happened after the election of Trump was actually to see all the women going down in the streets and women's march. And it was pretty much the whole world's women understanding they actually really have to take a stand and actually wanting to participate in bringing a positive change in a positive way. And that is something that I really value. And everything that happened since then, it's been really harsh and it's been really tough and it's quite incredible, but that's nothing new to me because that's something I've seen in my surrounding for so long. And actually seeing more women and more people and more men also taking part of that battle is something that I find very hopeful. And of course, like it's quite difficult because there's two sides, like I've spent my life putting the finger to show the inequalities and to show the lack of opportunities. But at the same time, all I wanted to do with this was just to bring better opportunities and to bring a more positive way of seeing how we could organize things. I love to see that people are waking up and people are actually taking a stand and people participating in being part of the change. I want to focus on that just because I like to find hope and inspiration. And I kind of feel that through positive examples, we can actually reach even more people to get them being part of that change. I've been for so many years the person pointing at inequalities, and I also saw how people stop listening to you when you're always the one telling all the bad things. And that's the first thing to do, is to show all the things that are not working. But then the second step, and even more important, is to bring other visions on how it could work. And then it's up to all of us to build and find solutions towards that positive change and to bring it.
Every sport, unfortunately, every sport needs someone like you, a woman who's strong, who believes in what is right and who's going to fight for that. There's a bunch of different causes that people do this for. I mean, you are fighting for gender equality. Then you have most of the athletes in the world fighting for climate change and protect our winters. And not saying that you guys are battling each other by any means, because you're not, but it seems like it takes an athlete or a group of athletes to be able to bring awareness to a bigger cause and make change within an industry and hopefully spread that outside of the industry. And that is what you are in Europe, and you've been pointing the finger for a long time and making change. And we're going to talk about more of that, but we're going to get into your life a little bit, and then we're going to talk about your career, and then we'll get into the movie, and then some of the things you've done for change will all interweave. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Lausanne, Switzerland. And I was raised in Lausanne as well. But I mean, I have 3 passports. So I am French, I'm Swiss, and I'm Liechtensteinerin. And so pretty much you have to understand it's really small areas. So I was going to school in Lausanne. My home resort is on the French side, but it's only an hour drive away, actually the closest mountain. But it's on the French side. It's really close to Chamonix. So I'm a big mix of the whole Alps, whether it's France, Switzerland, and Austria and Liechtenstein. I speak French, I speak German, and now I speak English thanks to the time that I spent in the US, actually.
Wow, you guys are so much smarter than us. We speak English, and then we all speak some sort of broken French or Spanish, it seems like, because we take it for like 5 years. But everybody from Europe seems to be able to speak more than one language, and we all assume that you'll speak English because we're American, and that's how we've always done it, unfortunately. But you started skiing as soon as you could walk, it sounds like. Your dad was a pro skier and then worked for Rossi and Lang.
Yeah, actually, all my cousins on both sides, my mother's and my dad's side, all my cousins are part of national teams. And then me, I was always a bit of a rebel and I never liked the idea of having to go through slaloms and all those really tight way of seeing the mountains. And my brother and I were both more free spirits, and we always liked riding a lot of off-piste. And then for a few years, there was not so much snow during the winter, so we started hitting jumps and kickers, and that was the start of my snowboarding time, because I was about 14 and I discovered snowboarding. It was a lot about freedom. It was a lot about fun. It was new. There was not so much structure to the sport yet. And it was exactly what I needed at that time. It was me starting my life, separating myself from my childhood. And it was a great thing to experience and getting me to travel all around Europe and then all around the world and travel with a passion and through a sport. It was something that was really beautiful because it really connects you with the area and then with the people there. And then, yeah, that was the start of the very first big airs. And I was also back then doing street rails and like more urban snowboarding, let's say.
So this is like 98, 99-ish when you get into snowboarding?
Something like that. I don't know. I never did the math, but yeah.
I did the math.
Something like that. And it was actually the really first competitions as well. So the first European Open. But it was very few of them. And back then, the girls were not really allowed to participate in competition.
And if you were allowed in the competition, they would put the women on Wednesday.
Yeah, like, or next week.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty much. But at the same time, back then, I was just riding with my friends. We were all guys. We would just travel from one session to another session. We were not really organized as competitions just yet. I was always the one girl that was shredding those big kickers with the guys. And I was just having the time of my life, really. And that's when I got sponsored really, really quickly. And that's when it all started.
Well, didn't your friends enter you into a contest that you didn't even know you were going to be entered into?
Yeah, that was my first competition. It was in my home resort, and it was a French Cup. That sounded so serious to me. I never thought I would actually have the level for it. And it was kind of funny. It was this really good kicker, the really big jump. And I got really excited, and they pretty much told me, well, they had written all of us in. So all of a sudden, I actually could ride a kicker. And then there was one bigger jump where all my friends went, and then I saw all the other girls being in line to the smaller kicker. And all the girls were doing double grab. So I thought, okay, so I should probably go there. And I went and I waited my turn and I jumped and I did that double grab, which I had never done that before. And I landed it. And somehow I didn't qualify for the final of that event. And I was so frustrated and I was so surprised and I didn't understand because I was like, well, I did all the effort to actually fit in. How come I'm not making it through? So then I just hiked up to the top of the bigger jump and I went for it and I did backside rodeo 5 and I landed it and I pretty much gave the fingers to the judges and I left. But then the funny thing with it is that I then knew that I did have the level. So after that I went to the next French Cup and then I won and then that was the start of my snowboarding career.
Well, that's as punk rock as it gets, I feel like, when you're flicking off the judges. And what kind of kid are you at that point? If you're going to go and give the fingers to the judges, are you like a punk rock kid? Are you fuck authority? I mean, what are you like when you're a teenager at that point?
I was definitely a free spirit. I just wanted to be free to do whatever I wanted. And that's pretty much what I still do. I still don't listen to what people tell me I should be doing. Actually, I guess I learned a lot from that experience because I understood that I was always better off trusting my guts and doing what I wanted to do. You know, it's going to make it or break it. Either it's going to go through and I'm going to be very happy, or it doesn't, but at least I'm going to be happy that I tried. And I don't like people putting me in that box saying, oh, you're allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that. Yeah, I never let anyone really tell me what to do.
How do you do in school? Did you get along with teachers?
That's an interesting question. I received this really long letter from a childhood teacher who explained to me that he really hated me as a student. You know, I was a kid that was really listening in school, and I was actually really participating in the class. I was really interested in being part of the conversation with the teacher. But my problem is that I was always trying to find the thing that didn't connect to whatever they were saying.
You were just poking holes in everything he would say?
Yeah. But the funny thing is with that letter that the teacher wrote to me, he pretty much told me how he understood only many, many years later when he saw everything that I did after school. That's only when it made sense to him who I was and what I was bringing to the world and why actually I was behaving that way and where it brought me in my life. And in a way, he was actually really thanking me for who I had become. And it was something that was quite emotional and really lovely because then he understood that it was not me trying to break his class. It was me being interested and actually me trying to really being part of that conversation. You have to understand, I am never unrespectful. I'm always just really trying to be part of understanding and I'm very curious and I like to be a part of the conversation. That's a good way to put it.
Did you ever get in trouble when you were younger?
You know, I was a kid that was not smoking. I was a kid that was not drinking. I was the one that was going to school, but really the thing I was living for was the weekend where I could go to the mountains and I was pretty much hitchhiking to whatever mountain had an event going with lots of other snowboarders. And I would go and I'd spend the weekend there and I would ride all day. I would dance all night and I would find somewhere to sleep. And then I would somehow make it back to school on Monday morning somehow. And at the same time, when I think about it, I think I was so crazy because I was this 16-year-old blonde, happy girl. And in the same time, like approaching life this way, I guess I connected with many other kind, lovely, super interesting, creative people that are like-minded. And that's something that made my life so much richer and fun.
At this point, I'm going to take a quick break and talk about my sponsors. And my first sponsor is Evo, and they've supported the podcast since day one. If you're a fan of the show, I hope you buy your skis, snowboard, bikes, outerwear, everything from Evo. They're the best retail experience in Denver, Seattle, Portland, and Whistler, and their website, evo.com, features the best prices, an amazing user experience, a no-hassle return policy, and free shipping on orders over $50. If you're in store, let them know you listen to the Powell Movement, and you'll get an additional 10% off. My next sponsor is Rescue Water, and each week I tell you how Rescue Water is proactive recovery. But what does that mean to you? Well, think of it like this. If you're really tired, you skip the coffee and grab an energy drink. Well, if you really need to hydrate, like after you get off the hill, finish a workout, or get home from a big night, make the smart choice and drink a cold Rescue Water. It replaces electrolytes much better than your traditional sports drink. It's a difference I can feel every time. It works. Make it work for you by heading over to rescuewater.com, that's RESQ water.com, and save 20% on a 12 or 24-pack case with the code RESQ Water TPM. That's all one word. Rescue Water is also available on Amazon. You said your snowboard career really takes off, and is this where you end up meeting up with the Mischief crew and end up filming with them, or is that before that point?
That was a bit before that. Back in France, that's when I actually met the Psychopit crew, which was a French crew of snowboarders. They were all pro and had sponsors, and they were part of the scene. They were filming, and they had a couple films in which I was part of. They were my best friends, so they would actually come and pick me up, on Friday afternoon after school. They would bring me to all those events. Within a year or two, I actually got to go pretty much all around Europe. And it's after going all around Europe on all those snowboard events that I wanted to see what was going on in the US. And that's how I landed on my first Burton photo shoot in Big Bear back then. And I couldn't speak a word of English. I remember I spent my time saying, "What? Say slow, what?" And I was really lucky to be teammate with Kimi Fazani, who spent her days explaining to me again and again and again and again what it meant, and talk slower to me, and Marie-France and all that clique where I actually got to meet all the girls in the US. And that's when we started filming with Rochambeau. And that was the best years of my snowboarding time, because that was the first year for all of us to be traveling the world and going to Japan and going to Russia and going to New Zealand and all those incredible places. And back then, me, I was just in the US spending most of the season, and I had my backpack and my board bag, and I would just crash on people's couches, going to events, and it was just a lot of fun.
I think it paid off. Was that what you got Rookie of the Year for in Transworld?
Yeah, that was the first year of me being in the US. Yes, it was. So
you're over here 1 year, and that happens really fast.
Everything happens so fast. Like my whole life, everything just shows up. And, I think I have this way of experiencing life where I don't take things slow. I don't evaluate. I don't think so much. I just dive in and I just give it my best. And I just try to live 300%, because if I get a chance or one opportunity to do something or to go somewhere or to meet someone, I'm just going to try to make the best out of it.
So you get Rookie of the Year, which for a kid coming over here from Europe and 1 year in the States, and to get that award, that's the biggest thing I think you could possibly do. Does it mean a lot to you at the time? And do awards even mean anything to you? Because it seems like something you just throw in the back of your van and then go on to your next adventure. But I don't know.
Yeah, pretty much. No, I never really gave so much attention to medals and to ranking and to that sort of thing. It's not something that actually really comes in my radar. But for me, that 1 year of being in the US with all the girls, and it was really the time of my life. But receiving it was something that was very special. Because again, I was coming from Europe and I didn't know anyone. But by the end of the year, I was actually best friends with everyone over there. And it was such a beautiful acknowledgement to receive from my peers. And it felt totally surreal. And it's just a lovely thing to go back to when people actually remind that award, like, thank you for reminding me of it. Because now very few people even think of it or even know of it. Out of all my snowboarding acknowledgement or medals or whatever it is, awards, it's my favorite one. Because it reminds me of the best year of my life, really.
And it's the one that puts you globally on the map where everybody knows who you are, because Transworld has that reach. Do you go to the award ceremony that year?
Yes.
And do you have to give a speech?
I don't remember that. I just remember At the time, I had my Oakley team manager, Lisa Holt. She was so great. And she would actually gather the whole Oakley girls team. So all those time, we actually get to share it together. And I remember going to that event, to that award with Marie-France and Greta and like all the girls. And it was something that was really special to us. And we just were having the time of our lives. And then for me, it was just something that was very special. And it's kind of funny because I'm quite sure I actually got kicked out of that party because I took my heels off at some point. I was dancing on the carpet in that place.
I thought you didn't cause trouble.
Is that really trouble to be dancing barefoot?
In this country, yeah.
So yes, in the US, I got in a lot of trouble, but never for important things. And they never ended up arresting me. They always kicked me out for one reason or another. But it was always just, to me, it seemed like it was something that didn't really matter so much. Dancing barefoot because my feet were hurting because I was a girl and I had heels. Well, now I've learned I no longer wear heels and dancing all night. But it was never anything that I did that was actually unrespectful or breaking anything or actually being bad. I never felt like I was bad.
That you're admitting to now, and that's okay. You can keep any secrets you have to yourself. But getting back to your career, who are the brands that pay you at the height of your career? Who's paying you to be a professional snowboarder?
It was Oakley and Burton. And those were the sponsors that I had for the longest period of time.
Can you make a good amount of money being a professional snowboarder? I mean, can you not have to worry about having a day job and just worry about snowboarding all year round?
If you're a man, yes. If you're a woman, yes, but it's more complicated.
I guess you're one of the Europeans that we know about here. So I would think that you were in the upper tier of snowboarders in terms of pay over there, because there does seem to be a big separation from even some Euros that move over this way. It seems like if you're, for me, where I worked for an American company, so it all made sense to have the athletes based out of North America in most cases, although we did have a European team as well. Is it totally separate in the brands that you're with? Does Oakley have a European team and have a U.S. team, and are you guys marketed separately, or is it all one big package deal?
Well, it is complicated because if you're from Europe and depending on the European budget, it's very difficult to make a living out of it. So for me, it was actually quite interesting for that because I got lucky enough to be in the US and actually depend from a more global budget. As soon as that question kind of arose and I was put back on European budget, that's pretty much what signed the end of it for me. It was really difficult also on the women's side to understand that in the US, it was always a bit more open-minded and actually had more room for women. The problem being that if you're from Europe and one brand already has an American girl, then they no longer will invest into a European girl anymore. They don't need it because they already have the American one. And that is something that's really holding the full spectrum of snowboarding in the larger sense. If all the brands are based in the US and only care about the American market, first, American riders are incredible and be all over the biggest medias, but at the same time, it doesn't mean they're really relevant to all of the other countries out there. And for snowboarding to actually really be talking to more people everywhere in the world, you actually need to have local riders getting a chance to making it as a professional career. And that's been something that's been difficult for riders that are outside of the US. But somehow I got pretty lucky in between those, even though I never got the real opportunities the same way if I had been American. That was always something that came up. Yeah, but you're not American. But when I'm in Europe, like, yeah, but you're in the US all the time.
Huh.
Kind of feel like no matter what you do, no matter how good you are, people will always tell you negative things, the reasons why not to give you a chance, why not to bring you those opportunities. But at the same time, for me, it was really a blessing for me to go to the US because I felt like the way I was riding could actually never really have been as successful if I had stayed in Europe. For example, in France, everything is very structured and has to go through federation and through competition and through national teams. And that's something that I was never into, and I would never have kept snowboarding if it had to go through that sort of way. And for me to arrive in the US where it was much more where I could be the rider that I was actually really putting it all on the line. I was just really going for it. It was more explosive. It was more with my guts. And in the US, I really felt like there was room for that and there was recognition for that. I loved it.
And in Europe, are there more opportunities outside of the snowboard world to make money? Because when I saw it, it seemed like the US guys, yeah, they were getting bigger retainers from the brands. But then I'd see the Euro guys have deals with BMW, and they'd have car and beer things that aren't even possible in the US because in Europe, the sport is much more ingrained into your culture. In the US, it's not as big of a deal. It's just something people do. And I would think you're able to sell more products and pitch more products using snowboard personalities over in Europe than you would be in the US because you guys are more of an entity where people might actually recognize you over there.
Well, that's a difficult question. I would say, first of all, that in the US, for a long time, you've been seeing the board culture, whether it's snowboarding, skating, or surfing. You see it all over. You see it on TV. People know about it. It's something that is actually recognized, let's say. Back in Europe, we are battling being in competition with institutionalized sports. For instance, skiing has always been so big part of the culture. But all the young sports never really made it to the mainstream media as such. So if you make it as a snowboarder, yes, then once you actually have that recognition, each of those brands have a different company for each of the different countries. So then if you're in France, you can approach a car company in France. And if you're German, you can approach a car company in Germany. And if you're Swiss, you can approach another company in Switzerland. So in that sense, yes, once you made it, then you actually can reach quite different brands. It's really difficult to make it to the top level of recognition in the media because the media will talk about soccer, they will talk about skiing, like the alpine skiing, because that's really part of our culture. But they actually really don't talk that much about young sports, which is the thing that we have to battle in Europe to actually get the media to put some interest and actually start following the younger sports.
We'll go back to your career, and it's on fire. You end up moving from Mischief to Runway, and you meet Leanne and all those people, I think, when you're filming with Mischief, and they're all your best friends. So you continue to film with them for another 2 years. 2008, you get second most influential female rider of all time by Slack magazine. I believe that's the correct title, right?
I think so.
And you've only been riding for like 10 years, and so you're already the second most influential of all time. But the crazy thing to me is at this time, it sounds like you decide to leave Burton, and it's the height of your career. You've just won 2 years before the biggest award of your entire life, or the best one, you just said, when you got Rookie of the Year. It's 2 years later, a year later, you're winning all these awards. You're on Burton, who's the biggest brand in snowboarding. And why would you leave a brand like that? There has to be something that I'm not seeing that makes you want to leave a company like that at the height of your career.
Yes, well, if you think about it in the business side, it's probably a bad decision. But for me, everything that I've done in my life, it really relates to the way I feel while doing it. And riding for Burton, as much as it was such a great opportunity and it was a great experience and I've learned so much from it, but on the personal side of it, it was too demanding. I was traveling all around the world and I was the only European girl part of the global team. So I was always in the airports. I was never going home. I used to have 2 days off for Christmas and maybe 3 days off in the summer. And the rest of the year, I was always in meeting. I was always working. It was just too much and very little recognition. I felt like they were really pressing me a little bit like a sponge, and they were really taking everything out of me that they could. And as much as I was always very happy to participate and very happy to involve myself with everything, at that point, I really felt like it was just too much pressure and I couldn't enjoy it anymore. Plus, I also have to say that back then, I was not really being paid as much as some guys or some American riders. And I came to the point where either I was going to stop snowboarding altogether or I had to rethink the way I was snowboarding. So I decided to go back to Europe and I just reorganized the way I was practicing the sport in the way I wanted, that would actually leave me to do the things I wanted and not like me feeling that I was a slave for a company. I just couldn't do it anymore. I was just so tired. I just needed to change it.
When you say a slave to a company and you say you had 2 days off for Christmas, 3 days off in the summer, I mean, I worked for a brand that sponsored athletes and we would own 5 days of their time off the snow. We would own none of their time on the snow. They would just go on whatever video shoots that we would pay for. Their life didn't revolve around the sponsor, but it seems like you were almost an employee who was allowed to snowboard and doing a lot of work that maybe some other people don't do.
Yes, in a way, it's a great thing to think that when you ride for Burton, you actually get to participate in the developing of the products. But on top of that, there was just way too much on my plate. And if you go back to that time, when I left, I was not the only one to leave. There was actually quite a few other riders that left at the same time, as many riders that got kicked out of the team. It was all at the same time. So if you think about it, it was pretty much the same time that Gigi, Elena Height, DCP, some riders got kicked off and a lot of other riders also left. So I think we just went to that point where it was way too much and we just, like a lot of people, just couldn't handle it anymore. At some point, you just kind of have to reassess. Snowboarding was always my love and my passion. And at some point, when it becomes this thing that you start hating, then you understand there is a problem. And that's where you actually have to think for yourself, okay, do I want to keep doing this? Or can I keep doing this? Or can I do it in another way? And I didn't want to totally stop snowboarding. I just changed the way I did it.
Okay. We'll go to 2009. You win Best International Rider of the Year, male or female, Mandu Du Snowboard. I probably said that wrong. 2010, you get second to King of the Hill, French Rider of the Year, third in the World Snowboarding Championships. You every year are pumping out wins or awards where brands should want to be all over you. I think you had like 25 covers in your career too. But your career takes a big change, I feel like, in 2011 when you decide to get on the Freeride World Tour. And when I look at your career direction, it was like as a kid, you didn't want to race. And you didn't want to compete, it seemed like, and it was totally in your blood. But then you get to be an adult and maybe getting older in your snowboard career. You know, you're not hitting rails as much anymore, I'm pretty sure. And what makes you want to compete?
Well, that's an interesting question. The first competition that I did, as you said, was the year before, where it was actually Travis Rice who told me, hey, we're going back to Alaska for King of the Hill. You should come because you'd love it. And I went and I loved it. And actually, I got second. But actually, the judges, they missed my run where I actually did a back three in my line and landed it, boom. It was so great that after that, I decided, okay, well, that was kind of fun. Maybe I could go see how it is on those freeride events back in Europe. And I was riding for Swatch, and Swatch was the main sponsor of that. And they were actually asking me to come to that first competition of the year, which I did. And I arrived, and I didn't know really what to expect. I didn't know how they were working, those competitions. And I did my run, but me coming from video, it was a very different thing because when you're riding for video, you're going first track and you really get to picture your line. But then on those competitions, they had put the women at the very end of the competitions, and I hadn't really understood that when you actually get into your line, there's like tons of tracks, everything, everywhere. And it was getting low light, it was getting colder, and everything was getting crisp, and the snow was getting really tight. So I pretty much straight lined the whole face, and I arrived at the bottom. And I was winning the competition, and I realized that nobody was watching, nobody was listening, nobody cared because they were organizing the podium of the men exactly while we were shredding the mountain. So all the press was filming the podium and nobody even saw us ride down. And that's when I understood and realized how girls and women were treated on those competitions. That's pretty much when I understood that I knew I could participate in making them change the way they were treating girls. And I knew that if I wanted them to change the way they were organizing those women's events, that I would have to actually participate in them. So I won that competition. I won $1,200. And the guy who had done last in the skiing competition, or second to last, had won $1,500. So that's when I didn't like it so much. And that's when I decided that I was going to do the whole tour that year, because as long as I was doing those competitions and as long as I was winning, then I would have the mic. And as long as I had the mic, I could then actually say how it was.
They invited the wrong girl on tour.
Exactly. That's pretty much what happened. They didn't really see it coming. And so what we would do at the end of each of those competitions, we would actually get all the girls together and we would actually make a list of all the things that could be improved for the next competition. And it was really genuinely just making a list of the things that could be better for the girls. And that's when we realized they really didn't care. So then I started to send that same email to also the sponsors of the event and then eventually to the press. And at the end of the season, it's kind of crazy to think that that actually got me a world title to just be part of the troublemaking. And at the end of the season, they asked me if I was going to be back in the second year because that was my first year and I was world champion title. I said, well, I will only come back the day they will actually really improve the way they treat women in the competitions. So I didn't go back. And then 3 years later, they came back to me and they said, oh, we actually put the women back on the tour and we actually improved the prize money for women. And so that's when I decided, okay, well, if I was able to actually bring some change from a bit of an outsider to it, let's see how much I can bring positive change being part of it. You know, if they have made the effort to bring positive changes, then I should probably support them in that direction and help bringing more positive change in that way. So that's how I ended up going back to those competitions years later, which I did. But then end of 2017, it was still a battle. It was still a struggle. Every competition, I kept on having always to ask, how come we can't get a chance to start the competition, not always be at the very end of the pack? And how come, you know, there was still a huge difference of prize money between men and women? And at some point, I just got really tired of having to fight all the time. I needed to find some positive energy and I needed to find strength and inspiration. And that's why I wanted to go to Iceland. And that's what led me to make that film. At the end of the day, I can't spend my life having to justify myself for being a woman. Maybe I can also have some fun with it.
Now I'm going to take a final sponsor break. And Spy Optic is celebrating its 25th anniversary. Yes, 25 years Spy has been crushing it with innovation and style. Based out of Southern California, Spy is a collective of athletes, artists, and product designers who live and breathe action sports. To celebrate this 25th anniversary, Spy is re-releasing some iconic shades. Jeremy McGrath's MC3, Dale Jr.'s Dirty Mo, and the timeless Scoop 2. They are badass and they are back. To get 20% off your Spy purchase, head on over to spyoptic.com, place your order, and then at checkout, enter the code TPM20, that's all one word, and note that this discount does not apply for the game-changing Ace EC goggle. To find out more about the products and the brand, head on over to spyoptic.com. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. They have been brewing the Northwest's best beer since 2006, and they encourage everyone to go drink some of their beer outside. Why? Because 10 Barrel is all about the outside. They live and breathe the snow and bike lifestyle and support it with events, like the final Hella Big Air event of the season. The next one is coming up April 6th at Sierra at Tahoe. If you're anywhere near, these are events you are not going to want to miss. Next time you're at the store, pick up some 10 Barrel. And to find out more about the beer that supports action sports, the events, and their pubs, head on over to 10barrel.com. Those are my sponsors, and now we'll get back into the podcast. The things that we missed in the middle of there before we get to your movie and some other things that have to do with your championing women and fighting is you do the Freeride World Tour, you go film with Standard, which is huge. I think every snowboarder wants to be a big part of a global production like that. In 2015 is a really crazy part of your life because you're part of a French reality show. And just hearing that you're part of a French reality show makes me think that snowboarders there or someone at your level is someone who's known all over France because they put you on a show like that. But that's just me. But there's a crazy accident that happens with a helicopter. And you, I don't think, were in the helicopter that crashed. You might have been in another one. But with all of the things that you've done in your life, from Alaska to wherever you go, there's so much risk. And then you get into a reality show, a show that does have a little risk to it, but you don't think being transported to the show is really where that risk lies. And what happens there? And we don't have to go too deep into it because I know it probably fucked you up a little bit. But what went down?
Well, so yeah, of course it was a reality show, but it was also a chance for all of us to live something that made us dream. The idea of it was we were two teams, professional athletes or used to be professional athletes, very big names in France. And we were in Argentina and they were going to drop us off on the top of a mountain. And then as a team, we only had water and we had a sleeping bag. And then it was up to us to find a way to find again civilization and find electricity so we could actually call the satellite phone, and the first team that would actually be able to call the satellite phone would win. So for all of us, it was really a chance to go on an adventure. And I know for a fact that all of us, we were there for the same reasons. And if I think of any of the moments that we shared out there, they were all beautiful moments. And as you said, 2 helicopters, it's quite close to what we have in the mountains when we go heliboarding, you know?
Yeah.
Your friends go in the helicopter, and as it happened, the helicopter crashed and they all died.
How long does it take you to get over something like that? Because you're going on this amazing experience with all these super talented people. You probably all have so much in common that you didn't even know, and you've made lifelong relationships. And then that happens. Do you need counseling? How does that work out for you?
Well, you know, to be honest with you, I've lost most of my best friends in the mountains. And that was prior the helicopter accident, and it was also after the helicopter accident. So in my life, I have lost some of the people I love the most to tragic accidents in the mountains. And you cannot ever really come back from it. The only thing you can do is learn from it. To make sense of things or value life and why you're here and what is important to you is the only way you can actually find some sort of peace through it. So for me, I understood that if I was accepting the risks in what I do, if I accept that risk for myself, I also have to accept it for my friends.
I would say the one difference, though, is in your life in the mountains, you expect that risk. I mean, I've lost a lot of friends in the mountains as well. And you hear when people go that way, a lot of people justify it by saying they go doing what they loved or this or that, and it's supposed to make you feel better, although it doesn't. With this one, though, it was just a total chance thing. I mean, same kind of accident, like you said, that happens in the mountains, but I don't think anybody goes into one of these reality shows thinking they have a serious risk. But that is a shitty part of the podcast that I don't want to talk about anymore. We'll talk about some more shitty stuff, though, and it has to do with you having to fight more. And in sports, in reality television, in everything in life, I feel like women have had to fight to get their due. It still hasn't happened. It's getting better, but it's not enough. And that's why you have to continue to be the squeaky wheel. But when you decide to actively lead the charge for change, there have to be different reactions from different groups. And first, what do the guy athletes have to say? Is there vocal support ever from guys for what you're doing, or are they just concerned about getting theirs?
Well, it's interesting that people are asking me that question, you know, if the guys have ever said anything. Well, I can't really remember of any guy saying anything at any point, like anything that would actually be supportive. But I would actually love to get that question asked to them, because how come we always bring that topic to women? Because it's exactly it. Like, how come the guys don't feel like they have something to say about it?
I would say that with all the marches and things that you're talking about too, there's some guys that go just because they know it's the right thing to do. There's other guys that go to support their families and their wives and they know it's the right thing to do. And sometimes guys are just stupid. And while they may believe in what you're fighting for, they may be just so ignorant that they're not even thinking that, hey, I could be of a help to her. I don't think any guy is just going to go, I mean, unless it's a really great guy, is going to go stand on a soapbox and fight for women unless he's asked to help. And that's just my perspective. But I think a lot of times it just goes over our heads in general. It's something I think about a lot with these podcasts because every woman I talk to has had an experience that isn't the same as the guys that I talk to. And that's not right. But there's never been any guy that's like, hey, I believe exactly in what you're saying and how can I help?
Well, there is one that actually has been really helping. That is Greg Long. And he's really been fighting to actually bring women within part of their big wave surfing competitions. And thanks to him, he was also part of things getting better in that direction. But in my sport, I know that I had like some of the best introduction of some of my interviews. I think one of the best introduction was written by Travis Rice. And within his project, he was also including women. I actually had a couple shots in the community project, and I know that he was also including Hannah Beeman. And on that personal level, I think that he wanted to be supportive, but to actually have an example to give you of a guy who really took a stand to really help out women in our sport, I can't think of one.
Well, that's great.
I wish I did have one, and up to you guys to actually be part of the change. But ignorance is not an excuse, because if you ask me, like when I hear any sort of statement that is racist or unequal, I will always be part of actually saying something. I will never just let it sit.
Do other women want to join your battles, or do they want to stay out of it because they don't want to rock the boat?
Well, I kind of feel like in each of our sports, it was always held by one woman.
Yeah.
Like thanks to Sarah Burke to actually bring women in skiing and equal prize money at X Games. And thanks to Mimi Knoop and all the Hoopla skate girls to bring equal prize money at X Games for skateboarding. And each of those battles were really pushed and held by one person or one group of people. And actually those changes mean so much for the following generations. And what I find really beautiful is to see all the energy that is brought by all those people that are bringing those positive changes, and to understand that we pretty much all do it because we know it's right and we want to open the doors of opportunities to the younger generations of women. And that's something that's really beautiful to see how many people will fight and will put so much energy to bring positive changes.
Okay, well, this is going to bring me to your movie project. It was with Aileen Bach. It's A Land Shaped by Women, and it's totally different than every snowboard movie you're going to see. There's some great writing in the documentary, but really it's the story of gender and your winter in Iceland. And Iceland has taken gender issues seriously over the past 30 years. They've built a society that in terms of gender functions better than any other country in the world. And I'll give you a couple of takeaways with what I learned from the movie. Iceland is number one in gender equality for 9 years in a row. And that's pretty awesome. Who was number one before them?
Oh, that's a very good question. I actually cannot answer to that question.
All right. The first step towards gender equality was a big Women's Day off in the 70s, and it showed how important women were to everything. And I feel like if that were something that could be done everywhere, if women just didn't go to work, didn't do all the things that people expect them to do, I mean, what they did, it was an amazing way to show society how important women are. And why don't other people take that approach?
I feel like this is the idea that we've seen going on Women's March, and actually on the 8th of March as well. Millions of women going down in the streets in Madrid, in Spain. Earlier this year, in January, we saw millions of women in India forming a line holding hands across the country. And so...
Wait, these are all out of the U.S., right? That is why I'm not informed of these. Sorry.
Maybe, but actually Women's March, you must have been informed from it. And actually for you to know, you said 70s, but actually the one that happened in Iceland happened on the 24th of October, 1975. That was coming after what happened in New York at the very start of all the feminist movement, where you had the founding of NOW, which is National Organization of Women, as well as Red Stockings, that went down in the streets to protest against Miss America, that was showing an image of women that they were not agreeing to. And it is because of that day that then the United Nations decided to make 1975 the year of women. And that's why the Red Stockings that were in Iceland decided to do something about it. They chose the 24th of October as it was the day of the United Nations. And when they were wondering what to do, they decided to go down in the streets. And yes, they were trying to demonstrate the importance of women's contribution to society. And they didn't want to bring it as a strike. They wanted just to take a day off. In that way, they would keep the positivity and the message in a positive way, so that the whole country after that decided to then elect the first women president in the world on universal suffrage in 1980, which was President Vigdis. And she is still today considered as one of their best leaders and presidents. It's just really beautiful to see how those changes can actually be brought on a positive manner and actually can really be influencing the whole society. And that's what I loved about Iceland, is that they see those changes and the people who bring those changes as something positive. And then they actually understand that they can really shape the society around those positive values and positive ideas. And sometimes in my surrounding, I felt like I was being shown as the joy kill, and like people were no longer listening. But at the same time, in Iceland, when you see it as something positive, then it's incredible all the changes you can bring with those ideas.
Yes, and here's a couple other takeaways I have from the movie, and then I'll get to more of my questions about it. So in 2008, they elected a female prime minister who rewrote the Constitution with 24 others and the public. and it's got underlying feminine characteristics, and the whole old system was based on men and risk. That was a pretty cool concept that I got out of the movie. Looking at the company Nikita and how it applies to what we're talking about, they pay men and women the same, and that was a no-brainer to them. And just seeing that mentality, I feel like that's where our kids are going to be as they get older. The last cool thing that I really noticed was November 24th, they had a rally for pay, and women leave work when they start working for free. So that gender gap, when it starts, they're not working, and it's visible to every male out there. Now, if there's ever the time to tell the story of what Iceland's doing, it's now. But you producing this movie creates a lot of questions for me. And you're taking the issue that's really a hot button. Things need to change. Was it hard to get money from your sponsors for this project when you're pitching such an important, but maybe even looked at controversial storyline? And it shouldn't be controversial. I think I'm using the wrong word.
Yes, you're actually putting the finger on something quite hot right there. Yes, it was difficult for me to get my sponsors on board. So pretty much what happened is like a lot of sponsor would be okay to give like pocket money to girls to do a little video on a little trip in Iceland. But I used that money for like a little video thing, and I made a film with it. And then in that sense, we're really not playing with the same sort of budget. And there's, a couple of things that I'd like to point out, because at the end of the day, it was really beautiful to actually have support for some other sponsors, which we could not have done this project without. But altogether, it's been quite heartbreaking to understand that I could not find a female cameraman that actually had the proper camera equipment to go film like proper film, because that made me understand that if we keep on investing in boys club to make little videos on a very low level, and that's at the bottom of the ladder, then all along the way, those guys had been able to invest into their camera equipment to actually bring it to the better and better cameras along the way. And at the top of the ladder, you have incredible cameramen in our industry that are so good at being in the mountains, and they have really great cameras and they do really great work. But if we never had that opportunity given to women at the bottom of the ladder, as a result, on the top of the ladder with the big cameras, you cannot find a woman who actually is still a part of the snowboard or the mountaineering industry and did get a chance to invest in her camera equipment. And if I see that happening today, how many years is it going to take for that inequality of opportunity to actually reach more women, to give them also the opportunity to become professional on the camera level and to actually be able to produce those beautiful imageries of mountains and in our films? And then it's the same thing about the narrative in our films. If the budget always goes to the same men in the same way for the same narrative, then first thing, we're just totally forgetting about all the other narrative we could bring that actually would be linked to our sports, and that would make our sport so much richer and so much more interesting and more appealing. And that's where we also really have to understand that the more diversity we will bring those budgets to and those financial supports to, then the more diversity we will see on screen, and the more diverse stories that we will hear, and the more diverse the narrative will become, and the wider will be the range of people that gets to be interested in our sports and our lovely lifestyle.
I watched the movie and left with the impression that Iceland is doing it better than anybody else in the world, and that you had an amazing working vacation. That was my takeaway. And when you make a movie like this, it's not your traditional snowboarding movie. It's more about a documentary, but not a full documentary. How do you get people to watch this one? I know you're on the film festival circuit now. How do you get the word out about the film? I mean, do you have a game plan of how to get people to see it?
No, I came back from Iceland and I had 2 months to finish the short version for the festival. And I just had the time to finish it. And I went to the first festival that it was selected in, and I had no clue what people would think of it. And then boom, it won the whole festival. And then the second festival it was selected was in Hollywood. And I went to Hollywood and I presented it in this beautiful festival in Hollywood. And then not only won the category of short documentary, which it was, but it actually won the whole festival as well. And then from then on, it was selected in, yes, holy shit, man. And it went actually all around the world. It was selected in 100 festivals around the world. And then as I was actually touring, showing the film in all those incredible festivals, I was still trying to finish making the longer version, which you saw, which is 52 minutes, which was the one that I wanted to make. And I had so much on my plate, but at the same time, the film was winning so many awards in festivals, and the whole press was talking about the film, and everyone wanted to see the film. And still today, I'm getting so many emails every single day of people who want to watch the film, of people who want to screen the film, of people that actually really love the film. And that is something that's so incredible to me, So I'm doing my best, and I've done my best from the start.
Having no plan was the best plan here. Make a great movie.
Yeah, I just do my best, and then apparently it is a topic that is interesting to more than just myself. And apparently there is more and more people that want to see the film. So, and my hope for the film, and again, it is not about me, it's about the film itself. I have witnessed the emotion and the love and the hope and the inspiration and the empowerment it is bringing to all of us women watching it. And it is a gift to all women, and it's a gift especially to the younger generation of women. And for me, I hope that they will get a chance to watch this film, just because I know it makes them and it makes us understand we can all accomplish beautiful things in our lives. And the other thing I had not thought of is to see that men also understand why this film is special. And it's been beautiful to see the conversation around gender equality that started from watching the film. And that is something that we can all kind of hope for, all of us as a group, to find solution in a positive manner on how we can bring positive changes within our society.
Okay, well, I have a couple more questions about the movie, but they have to be really short answers, and I know that's going to be a challenge for you because that's not your style.
I just wanted to say something. It was not a holiday. It was actually proper filmmaking. So thank you so much for taking that in consideration, because
it just looked like you guys are having a great time and going around and getting the information that you wanted to. I mean, it was a documentary with snowboarding and really you seeing the culture there. You had to work to make a movie. I mean, I understand you actually were working the whole time. I didn't mean to insult you there.
Thank you.
What is the actual pay gap in Iceland?
In Iceland, there is still a 16% gender pay gap.
Okay. And are there traditional roles in that country? Is it customary for the male figure to work and the woman stay home with children? Or is it doesn't matter there?
Well, if you look back in history in Iceland, at the time that there were Vikings, the men would be on the boats and the women were actually staying on land, and they were taking care of the whole business. So Icelandic women in that sense are really strong and actually get a bit more respect for what they do because they've been the one holding the business back at home. But really, the gender pay gap, you actually have to understand the way it's measured to understand what it really means. So, of course, there are businesses and positions where women get less paid than if they were men. And actually, that comes in play when we actually have to negotiate for salaries for jobs where men feel more confident and they will always negotiate salaries, and women tend to accept whatever is offered to them, and that is very closely linked to self-esteem. And I also feel that the best place to find self-esteem is in sports, because when you see yourself progressing in sports, then you don't need someone to give you a label for it. You know it for yourself. The first time you actually get to take a wave surfing, the first time you land, let's say, a backside three or whatever it is, you really feel that self-empowerment. And that, when you have it through sport, then you can actually bring in all the projects in your life. So if I had one tip for all the girls in the world, I would say go into some sports, have fun with it, because you might as well grow from it. And probably you'll be able to bring that self-confidence in everything you do in life.
All right, so that one didn't fit the short answer mold, but that is quite all right. Are women objectified in the media over in Iceland at all, like they are, it seems like, in every other country? You didn't notice?
I can't really reply to that one particular question. It's probably better if I don't.
Okay, another question you probably won't like from me. There's a lot of domestic violence everywhere in the world. What are the rates like over in Iceland? Because this is the country that's doing it the best.
This is the one issue that they really put a lot of effort into trying to combat. But as you said, this is a problem we see worldwide. And then again, this is a very complicated topic. And again, Iceland is doing their best to try to fight it. But this is a very, very complicated subject.
Okay. Well, at this point, I have a part of the show that I call Inappropriate Questions. And I usually try to have someone who does know you well ask you 3 inappropriate questions. I was trying to get in touch with Aileen Bach through the guy who runs Curator magazine, I guess, or Curator Publishing, and he's like a legendary dude in publishing over in Europe, but I don't know anything about the European scene. I didn't make that happen, so I made up 3 questions for you.
Okay.
My first one. You're a person who's going to fight for what you believe in. And I would think behind the scenes, you have to do a lot of fighting for pay, opportunities, and a lot of shit. And that's always the case. But have you been in situations where people are exhibiting sexist behavior in front of you? And how do you deal with that?
Oh, yeah. I also got my bum grabbed a couple times. And so I just punched the dude in the face.
Okay. Well, that answers my second question, but you can answer it a little bit better here. My second question was going to be, have you ever been in a fist fight? Thinking of you flicking off the judges when you're 15 years old makes you think you've probably been in a fight in your life. And have you been in other fights other than when people grab your ass?
No, actually not.
Okay. When you look back at the fight that you've had over the years, has there been one person on the male side of the table that you really look at as someone who advocated for you? I kind of asked you that and you said no. But on the opposite side, this is where it gets inappropriate. Is there someone who's really been a speed bump for women and has really done more than other people to make sure you don't have equal anything?
Yes, quite a few. Let me just bring Nicholas Halewood, the boss of the Freeride World Tour.
Huh. You're calling someone out by name.
Well, that's why you asked me, so yeah. Well, the only thing is because he's known of the issues and he has chosen not to address them. So in that sense, he definitely participates in being part of the problem. You know, earlier you asked me if there was other snowboarders that took part of helping the cause. And no, I couldn't not think of other professional athletes in snowboarding. But actually, in snowboarding, I would like to give my hat off to Drew Stevenson, who is the one writing all the rules about the freestyle tour back then was called TTR, who actually really brought equal prize money for women by actually getting me all those sexist comments back then and actually getting into really a passionate conversation and why it was important to actually include women within the tour and why it was important to actually bring equal prize money. And he was the brain who actually translated that passion into making it part of the rules of the TTR back then to bring gender equality within freestyle snowboarding. So thank you, Drew, for that.
Well, I want to thank you for your time. And I've got to say, if snowboarding had 10 more of you, and every sport had more people like yourself that are as passionate, that believe in what is right and don't really care about anything else but what is right, it would be a better place. And you're the type of person that when you walk into event management's office, you're like, oh shit, here she comes again. But you're always there to fight for something that's right. And there's something to be said for that. I thank you for your time and congrats on the movie and continue to win awards. And that's all I've got. You should get some sleep.
Thank you so much. So kind of you.
So that was time with Anne-Flore Marxer. And I wouldn't want to be on her bad side. She is a fiery one with strong beliefs, and I agree with all of them. It's pretty sad that women still need to fight in this day and age for equality. And unfortunately, I personally feel like it is going to take a lot of people dying off before things get much better. While raising awareness is great, if people are still demonstrating negative behavior towards the cause, maybe these things need more than just awareness. And to me, old age and dying off is going to be the big changer in our society. Regardless, if there are no squeaky wheels, things don't change, and what Anne-Flore is doing is important. So check out our movie, and if you are listening and have a position in the world where you can have an impact on women, make the right choice, not the one that'll just benefit your bottom line. That's the podcast for this week. As always, I want to thank you for listening, ask you to review me on whatever platform you listen to me on, and support my great sponsors. They are Evo, Rescue Water, the 10 Barrel Brewery, and Spy Optic. Have a great week, everyone.